Was former Vice President Dick Cheney a war criminal?
I would say yes, because we were led into a war, the Iraq War, on completely phony pretenses, not mistaken pretenses, but phony pretenses.
Jeffrey Sachs thinks recently deceased former Vice President Dick Cheney was a total war criminal, and I have to say, so do I. And in this clip, he explores some of the most pernicious effects of the policy of the Bush administration, with Dick Cheney playing a lead role in the war in Iraq, the Patriot Act, the DHS, etc., and what effects that still has on Americans today. So let's watch. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
The neocons led by Vice President Cheney, late Vice President Cheney, wanted a war in Iraq, and they sold the war to the American people on false premises. And of course, the war itself was devastating, illegal by international standards. So that's a war crime to launch a massive war and occupy a foreign country. And it was done on a tissue of lies. So this was a tragic and extraordinarily costly episode for the United States. Trillions of dollars, thousands of lives lost of Americans, many more lives lost of Iraqis. A devastation to the region that still is reeling from the Iraq War and the many other wars that Cheney championed. So he was not a positive contribution to America's stability, prosperity, or security.
Yeah, if anything, I think he's putting it lightly there, and I think that applies to every president, vice president that supports these policies. We haven't had a declared war since World War II. So, Sachs can talk about international standards, but just by constitutional standards, which in Article 1, Section 8, it puts that power in the hands of Congress. Congress didn't declare it. They did pass an AUMF. That's bad too. That essentially defers powers from Congress to the president to fight this abstract war. But what are the fruits of the war on terror? It's 5 million people killed at the hands of this butcher, Dick Cheney, that was pushing and prodding Bush to be more bellicose than even Bush was, along with the other neocons like Paul Wolfowitz and Richard Pearl, the project of a new American century. Those people backed us into this, pushed us into this stupid conflict that wasn't just stupid, it was maniacally evil. It led to 20-year occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq, the Patriot Act, the DHS. We have people sticking their hands down our pants at airports now because of this. It was the beginnings of a mass expansion of the surveillance state that Edward Snowden blew the whistle on. Dick Cheney is a total supervillain. He doesn't deserve any adulation whatsoever, despite how much he's getting from the political establishment, which was pretty predictable, by the way, that he would get that because he was such a critic of Donald Trump, too. So he's just going to get fluffed by everyone in the liberal and conservative establishment.
Let's not forget the Patriot Act, which he caused to be written before 9/11 in anticipation of the right event at the right time, which came on their watch, Bush and Cheney on 9/11. Let's not forget his so-called enhanced interrogation, which of course was the rampant CIA use of torture, publicized by the late Senator Dianne Feinstein over the objections of just about everybody involved. Let's not forget that he and his buddy Donald Rumsfeld together dominated American defense policy for about 16 years. And
basically,
where did it bring us?
Basically, since 1992, and I would say until today, because Trump has not made any real changes of foreign policy, the United States went into overdrive on a delusion, an arrogant delusion that the U.S. Runs the world. And it entered into many wars on that basis, massive military spending, massive red ink, and trillions of dollars, massive expansion of executive prerogatives of the kinds that you mentioned: surveillance, spying, torture.
Absolutely justifying torture at CIA black sites, which we know about thanks to whistleblowers like John Kiriakou, heroes talking about that. And it's absolutely true. The monstrous effects of this goes far beyond what most people think. It is 5 million lives lost, thousands of U.S. servicemen. Some of them that did come home, they blew their brains out because they couldn't, fit back into society. Their lives have been totally destroyed by this madness. $10 trillion in total spent on this war on terror, and we're $38 trillion in debt. The absurd amounts of inflation that this caused because the central bank simply just printed new currency to finance it, which is a tax. Inflation is a tax. It's an unlegislated and in some ways most unfair tax. All this is the fruit of the Bush-Cheney regime. We've continued to pay the price. Sachs and Napolitano are both completely right. He's a war criminal. He just is. So is Bush.
That are completely outside of the values that we supposedly profess and outside of the Constitution. So in this sense, the neocon era, which MAGA was supposed to bring to a close but has not done, has been a period of growing insecurity of the United States, growing debt, growing economic distress and inequality. It has not brought this period of global U.S. dominance that was claimed all the way back in 1992, with Cheney playing a central role. It has brought a remarkable weakening of America, an increased insecurity, perpetual war, and we're not done with it yet because, Trump came into office claiming that he was going to end all of this. These wars continue, and basically the foreign policies of the neocons, this grandiosity of American power, continues until today.
Yeah, he's exactly right. Right now, what are we talking about? Potential regime change in Venezuela with a complete carrier group move there. Just a few months ago, we had a new war with Iran, which isn't over yet. There's a ceasefire, but who knows when that's going to be violated. We have to, just bank on the fact that no president, including Trump, will violate it again, as Netanyahu prods us in that direction, saying, hey, nuclear bombs are about to go off in Boston and New York. He told that to Ben Shapiro in an early October interview. These are the fruits of the treacherous war on terror, the lineage of Dick Cheney. And you know what? Jeffrey Sachs is right. The Trump presidency was supposed to be a repudiation of the neocons. In the first term, it wasn't. He sat with John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and let them steer foreign policy. And even if you said, oh, hey, he learned his lesson in the interregnum, and now in the second term it's different. No, he has Marco Rubio as both the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. He did have Mike Waltz, another neocon, as the previous National Security Advisor, and he has the CIA running by John Ratcliffe, the Zionist neocon stooge that was responsible for extending FISA 702 warrantless wiretapping. So that's where we're at. The neocons still steer our foreign policy, regardless of who you elect.
Why is Al Jolani, a man who killed Americans, a man who cut people's heads off and boasted about it, a man who today is slaughtering Alawites and Christians, being welcomed into the Oval Office on Monday?
Because the United States spent 14 years to overthrow the Syrian government, a task that President Obama assigned to the CIA in Operation Timber Sycamore. And Jolani is the quote-unquote success of American policy. This is how America does things. It has frequently turned to jihadists to be the American fighters in proxy wars. It built Al-Qaeda in the 1980s. when the U.S. supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, meaning that that country would have more than 4 decades of instability and war through U.S. machinations. So this is not outside of the norm of American foreign policy. It is part and parcel of the CIA-led strategies of regime change, of which Syria was one of what I think is probably about 100 cases since the CIA was established in 1947.
Yeah, he's exactly right. And that's one of the most hypocritical things, by the way, of U.S. foreign policy and how treasonous this is. And speaking of Dick Cheney, al-Jawlani, who's now known as al-Shara, the leader of Syria, was al-Qaeda. He was an al-Qaeda fighter in Iraq, fighting against U.S. soldiers. He had a $10 million bounty on his head. Well, he eventually founded the al-Qaeda affiliate, the original one in Syria, recognized by the leadership, Ayman al-Zawahiri, of Syria. And just because Israel wanted Assad deposed, the U.S. supported through Operation Timber Sycamore, he talked about that, the funneling of arms to ISIS and al-Qaeda operatives to take him down. Well, what's that led to? A destabilized regime now with an al-Qaeda leader at the head. They're rolling out the red carpet for al-Qaeda. This is treason by the Constitution's definition of treason in Article 3, Section 3. It just is. It's aiding or abetting the enemy, giving an enemy aid and comfort. This is exactly what it is, and it's just completely swept under the rug by the media. Most journalists don't talk about it. Thankfully, Sachs and Napolitano do, Max Blumenthal does, Aaron Mate does, Scott Horton does, Dave Smith does, but too few people actually talk about this. And not only has the media and the political establishment whitewashed this, the president goes out of his way to conceal that this is Jawlani's background. Why? Because Israel plays more nicely with al-Qaeda than it did with Assad. But I'm an American. I don't give a crap about what Israel thought about Syria. The fact that some arms from Syria got into the hands of Hezbollah. Well, I'm an American. I care about al-Qaeda. I care about al-Qaeda being my enemy, but more than that, I care about my enemy within the gates. Because our enemies are not primarily foreign, man. That is a propaganda scheme to pit us against threats that don't generally deprive us of our wealth and liberty, like the U.S. government, that plunges us into wars, expands the surveillance state, steals half of our wealth, and just completely desecrates American liberty as it was once understood. But this is the heritage of the Bush administration, of Dick Cheney, who constantly pushed further than even some of the most rigid neocons in Bush's cabinet wanted him to push. The architect of the Iraq War, the architect of the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, where the U.S. spent trillions of dollars, killed hundreds of thousands of lives over 4 presidents to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. That is the Cheney legacy. He doesn't deserve any praise. He'll get none from me. But what do you guys think? Was Dick Cheney a war criminal? Are all presidents war criminals? What are the worst effects of the Bush-Cheney legacy and the Bush-Cheney policies? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Judge Napolitano. Awesome segment. Totally agree with Sachs. And if you like this video, please consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. If you do that, you'll get access to all of my videos, the ones that are members only right now, before the general public. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below, plug in your email, and I'll send that to you free of cost. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.